Is the talk of, is there racism? How do people treat you? Do you feel out of place? The history of Northern Ireland is a little bit different than the rest of the UK. Like Africa is such a big country. There's over 50 countries. There's no way I'm going to know James from Nigeria. You learn to blend in. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're seeing my face for the first time, my name is Snowy and I'm an African immigrant living in Northern Ireland, UK. On this channel, I share life through the eyes of an immigrant living in the UK in a different country. And if this is content that you would like to see, then please hit that subscribe button. So today we're going to talk about being Black in the UK. So just a disclaimer, this is my own personal experience. This is in no way a blanket for everyone else who is a Black immigrant living in UK. Just in case you guys start coming for me and saying, that's not true. It's just my experience. So just a quick geography note. It might seem like common sense for a lot of people, but you'd be surprised by the amount of people who don't really know the geography of the UK. So the UK is divided into 4 parts. It is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Yes, Northern Ireland is part of UK. So every place is different in the UK, like the type of population and like culture in England could be different from the one in Northern Ireland. So this is just my experience as being a Black African immigrant living in the UK and how it actually feels like to be Black. This is actually a question I get asked a lot. Yeah, we can see your life is good, or you say you're having a good life, but how does it actually feel being Black? Like, there's the talk of, is there racism? How do people treat you? Do you feel out of place? So today we're going to dive into all of that. Let's unpack it. So I am not by any means a historian or an expert, or nor will I ever claim to be, but the history of Northern Ireland is a little bit different than the rest of the UK because there was something called the Troubles. And I'm sure there's plenty of information on this on the internet if you want to look at that. But the Troubles seem to have affected the diversity in Northern Ireland as compared to the other parts of the UK. The reason I won't be diving deeper into the topic of the Troubles is because, like I said, I wasn't here during that time, and I won't claim to know about it. Even the locals, it's not something they speak about a lot, but the information is there for you to find out. But the reason why I'm mentioning the Troubles is because, like I said, it did sort of, in my opinion, affect the diversity in Northern Ireland as compared to other parts. So while we're still on the topic of diversity, right? Obviously, I'd mentioned in my other videos that I think it was when I spoke about culture shocks. I mentioned that I had been to the UK many times. My father lives in England, and that's where I had ever been. So when I moved to Northern Ireland, it was my very first time here. I'd never been there. I had only, like I said, been in England. And obviously, you could see that if you come to the UK, you're obviously coming to a predominantly white place because that's where you've decided to go. Just like if you go to, Nigeria or something, the population will mostly be Black. So you do expect that. But in England, I always saw quite a lot of, cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, even though it wasn't a lot, but it's still, you'd go out of the house and you'd see someone Black, you'd see someone Indian or whatever. But what really was a culture shock for me here when I came is how different that was than England. It was really, something you can't ignore difference. Like you're literally the only one. You feel like you really, really stand out in Northern Ireland. Now, that's when I arrived in 2022. I will say that it has diversified a little bit since then. The capital city of Northern Ireland is Belfast. That's the biggest one there. And I find that, just like it would be in London, because it's so central, there's universities there, so there's students. I would see more black people when I am in Belfast. But it seems like the more you move out of the city, into the other smaller towns, is the less black people you will see, which is why it's also very important to choose wisely where you stay, but that's a topic for another day. When I first moved to Northern Ireland, I lived in a place called Bangor, and now I live in a place called Newtownards. These are not too far off from Belfast, but like I said, you are starting to move out of the city. So what was a cultural shock, obviously, was the fact that I would walk into a shop, I'd be the only black person. I would walk into the bus, I'd be the only black person. I would go on the train, I'd be the only black person. I go to church, I'm the only black person there. So it's stuff like that. It's not like you're going out of your way to notice it, but you can't help but notice it because it's so obvious. You're just like, oh, I noticed that it was so bad that, like, you're so used to not seeing anyone else of your skin color that whenever you do actually bump into someone who's black, it's almost like you take a double take, like, wait, what? And you do this little, like, stay, like, oh, that's a black person. Because it was at a point where, like, you really didn't see much of them. So that's just how I felt in the beginning. The reason why I'm pointing this out is because of the fact that I'm trying to highlight the fact that you feel as though you stand out. You just can't help but feel this way because it's so noticeable. You feel like you stand out like a sore thumb, or whatever the saying goes. But I also want to highlight that it's not the fact that it makes you want to, like, stay indoors, or you feel, like, people are going to bother me. No, no one really bothers you for it. It's just that you can't help but notice that you stand out, essentially. Experience with being black in Northern Ireland has, for the most part, been a positive one. In fact, it has been a positive one. I don't know why I'm saying for the most part. It's been a positive one. I have, in my church, like I said, I am the only black person, but I feel very welcome. And I suppose, it's church. They're supposed to accept you for who you are. But you just sort of, you learn to blend in. No one's ever had any racial discrimination towards me openly. And so it's not like you walk around feeling like, oh, someone's going to have a go at me, someone's gonna throw, like, racial slur at me. No one really bothers you at all. It's just that you feel like you stand out. And that's why it's important, even for your own kids, to teach them to be so proud of who you are. Like, right, you're black, so what? And especially because if you move to a country like this, you do expect, like, what else do you expect? You expect to not be the one who's dominating a place where you're not from. So obviously the local people are Caucasian, and that's okay. If you have a problem with that, you probably shouldn't move here. So yeah, just to highlight that, it's not that I have an issue with it, but it's just a question that I get asked so much, like, how is it really, how are people accepting? So that's why I am essentially doing this video. Someone once said, could the fact that I am in a relationship with a local, a white British man, also have an effect on the reason why maybe I wouldn't get, people leaving things at my door, or, like, trying to, like, outright attack me? I don't know, maybe, but I can't speculate. All I can go off is my experience, that I just haven't been bothered. And I lived on my own for, say, about a year before I actually moved in with my partner. And, I still never, got any, outward hate, So, but again, I think it depends where you live. if you live in places like, close to estates, or, I don't know what I can, sort of pair it with, almost like being in the ghetto in the location back home. You would find people who are of a certain mindset, and I don't want to offend anyone, but who have a bit of a backward thinking, or I don't know, like just sort of feeling like, oh, this is our part of the world. Like, what are you doing here? Immigrants out, xenophobia. For people who are in South Africa. So you would be careful either way where you stay, to try and find a place that, has a lot of people who are in the working class, who won't have time to bother with nonsense like that, would be my advice. But that's not because I'm saying I know people who've lived, in their states and been bothered. No, it's in my logical thinking. That's why it would be wise to choose where you stay. I had a mostly positive experience. People have been friendly to me. Like I said, no one has really, been nasty to me. My partner's family as well has also really accepted me. I feel like I've known them for years. That's how lovely they are to me, and obviously my partner. So I'm not surrounded by people who think negatively about the color of your skin, so which has really made my experience here really good. But to be honest, there's also stuff that's little cringe, or however you may call it, but like you would get stares sometimes. You really would get stares when you walk in, or you're walking, you get that stare. And especially, it's so funny, kids, they don't have those social cues, or they just do what they want. So you'd see a lot of the staring from like them. We'd wear a lot of wigs, or have different hair, and you just find them just sort of staring, trying to figure out what's going on. If When I used to use the train, like, and I'd sit next to a kid, you'd see them really staring, because like I said, at that time, most of the time you'd be the only one, you'd be the only black person or whatever. So there was that a lot of curiosity, and I think even with the adults, there would be that, a bit of curiosity. Most of the time they would just stay, but when they do engage, you get those questions, like when you start to speak, they're like, oh, you know, why is your English so good? And, you have to always explain why your English is so good, because they expect you to be like, I don't know, I don't know what it is. But like, that's what they expect. They're like, why is your English so good? I'm like, I don't know, because it is, because we speak a lot of English. I don't know. But you have to answer questions like that, or like, oh, is that your real hair? And, especially with whenever I don't have braids, I'd wear a lot of wigs, because that's sort of, culture, black culture, to wear wigs as women. And you'll show up in a different wig a different day. So then it looks like, you're, there's that confusion that they're like, is that your real hair? No, but you had different hair the other day. And it takes time for them to actually compute that, no, this is a wig. And then it'll go from then, why do you wear wigs? What's the reason? What's wrong with your real hair? So there's all of those, questions, and, stuff that you think people know, and it's like normal. You wear wigs, you speak English. The locals here would be like, oh, but why? Or, all that curiosity. I'm trying to say, sometimes you might feel that people treat you differently, but I don't think it's out of malice. It's not to make you feel bad about yourself. I think it's just, from my experience, it's just been like genuine curiosity, or they ask you, why are you so, your skin is very light, you're very caramel, why is that? And you're like, obviously they're not used to seeing diversity in black people, that we come in all types of skin colors. There's very light people, there's very dark people, but we're all one people. I want to get into one that's been quite hard for me, which is parenting a black child in the UK, in Northern Ireland. So my son, where he goes to school, whenever he first started, he was the only black child in his class. I think there was another one in a higher grade, like year 7 or something. But for like a good, I'd say 6 months to a year, there wasn't a lot of black kids in the school. It has sort of diversified a little bit now because, there's been a lot of, migration over the past year or two. But he still is in his year group. My son is in year 4 now, and they have 2 classes. He still would be the only black child there, and that's come with its own questions within him, him trying to make sense of the whole situation. I'd say it's something he's still struggling with. He's obviously, at first, whenever he was in like P1, P2, he maybe didn't really notice much, but the more he's getting older is the more you start to see that he's starting to notice stuff like this. He's saying questions like, oh, I'm the only one who looks like, who has brown skin. Why is my hair different? Because he's starting to notice, that he is different. And I think as a parent of a black child in the UK, that's something you need to expect that will come, because I wasn't really mentally prepared for it. It really threw me off guard. And then, he starts to have self-esteem issues. Whenever I first took him to the park, I remember he was very, had a low self-esteem about himself, and he'd be like, no, I don't want to play there because they're all white. And I'm like, no, you need to, you should be okay to walk into any room. You're beautiful the way that you are. And he'd say stuff, come back from school sometimes and say like, oh, I think I look ugly, the other people are more handsome or good looking than me. And this is stuff you don't expect from a 7-year-old, but this, you have to take it obviously seriously, because this is something that's really affecting him. And all you can do is really try and just drill it into him that you are who you are. You will always be black, but that's okay. Make him find something good about him being unique, because he's looking at the bad, and he's looking to me as a parent to make him try and make sense of all of this. Another thing I would notice is he'd play a lot of like PlayStation TV games. He has a PS4, so he, in the games that he plays, you'd find him picking white characters with blonde hair, and I'm like, but that's not a good representation of who you are. That's not how you look. But that's what he seems to prefer, and it's been a very hard one as a parent to see and watch, because you just want him to know that, look, son, it's okay. You're fine as you are. You're different, and you have that bit of guilt where you're just like, obviously you've put him in this situation, but and you never think of the whole negatives of that. You think, oh, he's just a child, he'll grow up, it'll be normal. But it's something that's really bothered him. So that's been a challenge, and I think it's an ongoing challenge. But it's still, all you can do is just try to make him feel proud of who he is. And that goes even for us as well. It could make you feel small or like you don't belong, but you are who you are, and you're beautiful in your own skin, and you need to be proud of it. Another question I'd get asked is, what about, finding things that remind you of home or that you normally need, like, African products, African food, and all of that. There are African shops, that sell both hair products or, skincare products. You have things like Amazon. You'd be surprised what you find on there. And just a lot of online stores that would sell a lot of that stuff. And then physical stores as well. There'd be a good bit of African stores, Asian stores, and stuff like that would sell things that we would normally have back home. But it's not something that I've really tried to focus on a lot, because it obviously is more expensive. Like the same thing you'd buy in South Africa or in Eswatini would be double, triple the price here. Obviously, they have to bring it over here, and there's tax and there's this and that. So you understand why the prices are so high. But I think it's not sustainable. So I've tried as much as I can to sort of adapt to the food that's here and not rely so much on like, oh, I need to go and do a grocery shop for African food. But that's my own preference. And also my son arrived here, he was quite young, and kids are so easily adaptable. He's really adapted to life here, and it also doesn't help the fact that obviously I live with a British man, and he was not very keen on the food that I would cook, the traditional food. So it's not fun as well just cooking for yourself. So if I'm feeling for something, yes, I'll go and get it. The stores are there, but it's not like it's not in my monthly budget to go buy African food and African stuff. If I need hair products, Superdrug is really good for a diversity in sort of the products they have. I find in Boots I really struggle, but also Amazon. You look up things and you'll get them. So there are stereotypes, misconceptions. I've spoken about the hair and English, but you'd also find a lot of the times they'd be like, someone would say, oh, you're from Africa. Oh, I have a friend from Ghana. It's such and such. Do you know them? And I'm like, Africa is such a big country. There's over 50 countries. There's no way I'm going to know James from Nigeria or Sam from Morocco. It's not just one big neighborhood. But that's what they think. They're like, oh, just because you're all black and you're from Africa, that you would know each other. No. This one would also be the English one. Like I said, people will think that like, oh, why is your English so good? But whenever my son had his first parent-teacher consultation, I remember they even went as far as asking me, do you need a translator present for the consultation? And I said, no, I'm pretty fine. I remember there was also a time when I went to pick up my son at school, and there was another little girl who's black and was waiting for their parents. And I was standing there because my son still wasn't out, and the teacher came out to me with the child and said, oh, are you looking for her? And I'm like, no, I don't know this child. So it's stuff like that where you're just like, oh my God, just because I'm black I would know the black child in the school. So it's stuff. I would say like it doesn't offend me very much. It's just like, right, come on now. But some people would make a scene about it and a big thing about it, like, oh, do you think I just know people from Ghana? Or no, I think it's just their way of trying to make you feel inclusive, or trying to be polite, but it can be misconstrued by some other people. But it doesn't really bother me. I do find that generally as well, there is sort of that, and I don't know if some people realize they're doing it, but like there really is that sort of subtle stereotype about maybe second guessing your capabilities. Like I said, even the English is a good example, but like there's sort of the stereotype that maybe because you're black, you might not be as capable in a variety of different things. If I talk about my relationship, like if you get into relationships, obviously we would be an interracial couple. You often are asked like, how do people, take that? How do people view that? And the answer is they're perfectly fine. Like I said, one thing about here, they do really mind their own business for the most part. And even if they are curious, they're not really outright like blatantly like, why are you guys together? What's going on here? So if it's just me and my partner going out on a date, going out to the shops, no one's really looking at us like funny. They might like look, but it's not like an uncomfortable look. So in fact, I wouldn't even make it one. You're just there. They're like, oh, okay. They're looking like right there together, and then people go on about their day. But where they do look is when my son is around us, because my son would obviously be black, and if me and my partner were to have a child, you could tell it's our child, because they'd be a bit mixed and not looking as black. So that's where you'd find a bit more of the stares. My partner's told me that, like, he literally gets people whenever he's walking with my son, like maybe he's taking him to school or they're at the shops or they're just doing whatever. He says you'd see people just l- look at him and then look at my son, and then you see they're trying to be like piece it all together, like what, trying to make it make sense, like, well, that's obviously not your child, or well, what are you doing just randomly with this little black boy? So it would just end at that as well. It's just like they look a bit more because they're trying to make sense of it in their head. But I think again, because of the politeness, no one would ever really come up and say, "Hey, why are you walking with that little black boy? What's happening here?" But now at my son's school, they know he picks up my son, drops him off. So, whenever my son is waiting to, getting picked up, they just know it's him. He comes for all his parent-teacher consultations. So in his school context, they know that he's a stepdad. But whenever we'd go out in other situations, you'd still find a little bit of those stares there. What do I love about being black in the UK, in Northern Ireland, because that's my experience. But what I like is that you get to really appreciate who you are. It teaches you to be strong. I think I've really, confidence-wise, had to really be strong, because if you don't, it's very easy for you to feel less than inadequate. Keep yourself sheltered in your house, but it's taught me to really be proud of who I am. Like I said, you would think it would be the most natural and obvious thing to prepare yourself mentally that, look, I'm going from a black country and I'm going to live in a Caucasian country, a white country. So there might be a little bit of, effects there mentally, emotionally. But no, you don't really prepare for it. So it's taught me to be proud of who I am. It's something that I am teaching my son to be okay with. He's still struggling, but I've really, like, I'm proud of my skin. It's so funny. Sometimes you see a lot of the locals here, they would, tan, and sometimes you'd be even almost the same complexion as them. And it's like, what? Some people in my country would like use bleaching products to try and be white. But then, like, white people would use tanning stuff to look a bit darker. So it's really funny. And then you see a lot of, some people would get like lip fillers, but then, you have natural lip, full lips, or there'd be all these body procedures, butt implants or whatever, but like, you would have that naturally. I've actually had someone ask me about my bum and say, "Is that real?" So it's really funny, because obviously where I come from, that would be very common, like for people to have like a big behind. But here again, for them, it's a culture shock. Like, why, your lips are so big, your bum is so big. But so it's things you just laugh about. Don't be oversensitive about things. Just let people ask and be curious. So this is what I want to highlight. What I wish people understood, and I've written it down so that I don't miss anything. What I wish people understood is that being black isn't one single experience. We are different people, just like the locals will be different people. We are not one people who like the same things. People in the south have so many different cultures compared to people on the north. We eat different food. We have different accents. There's we like in if you like, I went to another church the other day, and there was a lady there from another country. I forgot what it is. I think it's Ghana or Nigeria. They're like, "Oh, you should meet. It's not, we're not gonna be friends just because we're both black." Do you know what I mean? So it's just not. We're the same people with different interests and all of that. It's just that we're different skin color. Curiosity is fine, assumptions are not. So you can be curious, is that your real hair, whatever, but just to assume that, oh, I probably can't speak English, or I probably don't know what McDonald's is. It's good to be curious and, ask the right questions, but like, don't just assume, oh, she's a dumb bee, or that's not cool. And it also taught me that representation matters for kids. like I said, my son is really in a bit of a difficult space right now where he feels like he's ugly, or he feels like, oh, he's not good enough to play in that playground because he feels like he stands out. So I've really tried to, now that the black community has grown a bit more in Northern Ireland, I really try and sort of surround him with people, other kids who are black, and just to have those experiences where he knows he can mix with both groups easily. And then the other thing is that diversity benefits everyone. It's a cultural shock for me coming here and realizing that there's not a lot of black people. It's a cultural shock as well for the locals who've mostly not had a lot of diversity, and now there's like a lot of black people coming in. So I think everyone just needs to be, understanding of everyone's sort of experience. The bottom line is you need to just be kind to everyone, because you don't know how they're feeling, or, make people feel like they belong. In my son's school, for example, no one would bother me, but I do feel very isolated. All the moms would sort of hurdle around each other. I find it's almost sometimes in a way of not bothering you, they sort of end up avoiding you, and you can feel really isolated and outcast. They're growing up, they have birthday parties, and whenever you go there, as the parent, you stay to supervise, but then you'll find yourself on your own, because they sort of, it's almost like they don't know how to treat you, they don't know what to say to you, they don't even know if you can understand them, for starters. So yeah, I think diversity benefits everyone. In my opinion, like I said, don't be like, that's not what I think. My advice to anyone who's moving to Northern Ireland, or anywhere in England, or any other new country where you might be the minority, is come with an open mind. Come with an open mind, expect anything. Don't do your research as well where you're going, so you kind of know what to expect. But even then, don't be like, this is how it's going to be. Have an open mind about how your experience will be, and just be prepared for anything. So yeah, be prepared for cultural differences. It's not just about you standing out because of the color of your skin, but like just the food that you eat, the things that you like to do. Yeah, just be prepared for cultural differences, because there's so many that I could go into. I've touched on some, but there's still quite a lot. And then find a community. I think this is common throughout all the UK, but it's very easy here to feel very isolated, depressed, alone. So try and find a community. A good place to start for me would be church. I find that church people are very, very accommodating. They would really try and make you feel welcome, and they're very helpful. What do you need? They'll try and be there for you. So that's a good place to start. Just try and, get out there more, just explore. Even, the little small talk that you make, you can build into friendships. I would be a person who stays at home a lot, but that's before I had my partner and before my son came, I did feel lonely. Sometimes I stay in bed a lot, I'd end up eating a lot, just very unhealthy habits, especially during the winter, because it gets really dark all the time and it's grey. In the summer, try get out there, because the summers are really beautiful. They're long, they're very bright. Just try and interact with people. Don't keep yourself locked up, or feel like because of how you look, you need to sort of stay out of place because people will stare. It's okay. Let them stare, so what? Stare back. So yeah, find a community, even if it takes time. In terms of dating, I know that my other friends, or people that I'm acquainted with would look at dating sites, but dating sites don't only have to be for dating. I'm sure there's sites out there for friendship, but also people at work. It's obviously good to have a fine balance between them, but like if you identify with someone and you feel like you have a lot in common, try, let's go out for a coffee. Put yourself out there as well, or try and make that effort. If you just have like one good, like I have my friend Carolina, she's from Colombia. We met at work, but she's she's really all I need, because I see her, she's like me as well, in the sense that she likes to do her own thing, and she stays at home. But like whenever I want someone to talk to, I want to go out, she's there. So just have like those 2 or 3 friends and you'll be good. Stay connected to your roots. It's very easy to find yourself losing yourself, and getting sucked into this culture. I'll make an example. My son, I don't know how it happened. He now cannot speak our language, but whenever he arrived in the UK, 2.5 years ago, he spoke the language frequently. And I realized, right, he's speaking English only at school. He comes home, and it's rude for us to speak our language because my partner doesn't understand. But you could really try and make more of an effort to keep your child grounded in their roots, to know their language. So I let it get out of hand where now it's so bad that I don't even know where to start. It's not to say I won't keep trying, but stay grounded in your roots. Remember who you are, but obviously do what you want. But I'm just saying it's quite easy to get lost and lose your roots without you even realizing. Yeah, and like I said, teach your kids pride and identity. Make them proud of who they are, make them understand who they are, and make them understand that it's okay to be different. And don't let, this is the most important one, don't let being a minority shrink you. Don't shrink yourself. Don't try and stay out of sight. Don't try and stay quiet. So don't try and feel like your opinion doesn't matter. No, do not shrink yourself, please, because it might be hard for you to come out of that. People will have their opinions, but that's okay. That's not your problem. It's really not. In closing, everyone has their own experiences, like I said, but that's just been my experiences and my take on being Black or being a minority in a country like this, and in a country like the UK that's predominantly white. And everyone has different experiences. If you have other things that you feel like you'd like to share, if you're a Black person, an Indian person, or any other minority living in a country that is predominantly not your race, can you tell me what you think, what your experiences are, like things that you have experienced that I might not have mentioned? And let's just try and encourage each other and just try and get through it together, and just to realize that we've decided to move to different countries, and that's okay for all different reasons. And these are stuff that you might not have been mentally prepared for, but we can all live in harmony. We are all the same on the inside, we're just different on the outside, but that is okay. We can only live in harmony. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave your comments. Like I said, please let's engage. I really like to engage with you. There was so much engagement on my video about cultural shocks, and I really enjoyed that. And don't forget, I upload a video every Sunday, so please stay tuned.